Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsey, a psychologist in Silicon Valley and the host of Super Psyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. Super Psyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't. Many of us grew up with the idea that we've got to spend a lot of time improving on our areas of weakness. While that may be true and certainly important at times, research indicates that we can get an even greater return on our investment of energy when we improve in areas where we are already strong. Yet, have you ever noticed that it's easier to get from absolute beginner to, let's say, 80% mastery than it is to get from 94% mastery to 97%? That first 80% tends to be way easier than that last 3%. What does it take to excel? What are the obstacles that frequently get in the way? And how do we transcend those obstacles to get to our very best during our lifetimes? Fortunately, I know just the guy to ask. Elliot Roe is a performance coach and hypnotherapist who has devoted over 14,000 hours to helping people perform at the top of their games. He has worked with professional athletes, professional card players, giants in business, and other people searching for excellence in the areas that matter to them. He will reveal secrets about what it takes to get to the very best of your abilities. So listen in as Elliot and I discuss the secrets of getting from 94 to 97%. Elliot Roe, welcome to Super Psyched.
Hey, Adam, thanks so much for having me on the show.
I am delighted. It's been so much fun geeking out to you on your podcast, and as you've appeared as guests on various podcasts talking about very different things. Your toolbox is massive, and it's so fascinating that you've been able to help card players at the professional level, UFC fighters, and various other high-performing people. First off, before we even get into the what you do and how you do it, how did you get into this?
Very unconventional way. So I was working in investments, solar energy investments at the time, and had a fear of flying. Someone recommended a hypnotherapist, and she managed to resolve my fear of flying in an hour. And it completely blew my mind because I had a fear of flying to the extent of I wouldn't fly long haul and it would ruin my vacations, just the thought of flying. What was interesting about it is it brought up a repressed memory I wasn't aware of. So I'm in this session, I'm very relaxed, brings up this memory of being at my grandfather's house, seeing a picture of a plane on the wall, small jet, being told it had crashed and killed one of his business partners. Memory I didn't consciously remember. Then I went home and I was like, it's really weird. This memory came up when I was in the hypno session, and Brandon had one of his business partners died in a small plane crash. And my mom was like, yeah, you know that happened. And I didn't. But it explained why I had such a severe fear of flying. And my fear of flying just disappeared from that. That completely blew my mind. And I wanted to learn hypnotherapy as a hobby. So I went and found a comprehensive course in hypnotherapy, got myself trained, and was expecting it to be when my friends and family say they're scared of spiders, I'll say, look, I can fix it. And it was going to be a fun thing.
Right.
Basically, that was the initial starting point. And then what happened is I started helping people. And when you help people and they see change, they tell their friends and they tell their friends and they tell their friends. And I started getting busier. I started working with some golfers and ended up helping them improve their score. And I had a friend who worked in the poker industry, and she said, hey, if you're helping people under pressure on the golf course, if you can help a poker player on a final table, it might be worth millions of dollars to them. Do you think this could work for poker? So I don't know. I'll offer free sessions to poker players and find out. And then I started offering these free sessions, and I started to see these really quite extraordinary results. And I mean, over the years, my poker clients have now made over $100 million. I mean, it went really, really well in poker. And because of that, professional poker players play poker with Wall Street traders. They play poker with professional athletes. They play poker with CEOs of companies, because we're talking about $1 million poker games sometimes.
Sure.
And because of that, my reputation built in poker. And then they would introduce me to someone on Wall Street who would start to use me, who would introduce me to somebody who runs a hedge fund, et cetera, et cetera. So everything grew organically from a fear of flying.
So,
yeah, really.
What a great origin story, and something that so many people can relate to. Flying is a terrifying thing. In fact, it caused me to interview a pilot for the purpose of exposing my listeners who might also fear flying, what's going on behind the cockpit, why they may have a lot of confidence in the person handling the cockpit, and perhaps addressing that gap between what we know. We know that flying is very safe intellectually, and yet there is something, even if you haven't
looking down.
Totally. And there's an old joke. Nobody claps when the taxi arrives, even though it's far more dangerous than flying a plane, but people will clap on a plane. And what's fascinating in addition is that within that origin story and how interesting these links are to follow on your hero's journey is the idea that you actually kind of caught a virus that you didn't even know you had by having heard something that you didn't even know you knew. And it was addressed through that hypnosis, and that the unconscious was maintaining this, and you were feeling this within, in all likelihood, your body, just kind of like what Bessel van der Kolk talks about with the body keeps the score. It was in there, and that somehow it was at least addressed, if not even excised, through the process of hypnosis.
Yeah. And that's what I found so intriguing about the whole process. I had a belief that we were running programs previously, but it was the feeling, the sensation of when I got on a plane, there was a big part of me that truly thought I wasn't getting off the plane. It felt life and death when I went on a flight. So, huge adrenaline, and even the taxi ride to the airport would be a stressful experience for me. And it made no sense at all because logically I understand how safe planes are. But when 5-year-old Elliot was told that someone close to him, it could have been my granddad who also used that plane, could have died in a plane, these are a threat and there's something dangerous. And in the same way that in the jungle, if the mum screams when she sees a tiger, the baby learns that tigers are dangerous. And it's really useful from an evolutionary perspective, but not so useful in the modern world. The thing that caught me and the thing that made me think, wow, if I can unwind this for people, and it's a relatively simplistic process to unwind these things using hypnotherapy, then I can change a lot of lives. And it's been really fun to play with that over the last decade or so.
And it's so intrinsically rewarding for you just to know that you are contributing to the wellness and betterment of people. And I'm thinking, and I'm going to do a massive name drop, in my interview with Steve Kerr, when he was describing his success with the Golden State Warriors, one of the books upon which his success has been built was The Inner Game of Tennis. He does not, to my knowledge, play tennis, but the transferable skills between hypnosis and mastery of various things apply to playing cards and UFC fighting. And I would imagine that the vast majority of my listeners are not UFC fighters or card players.
Professional card players, no.
What's that?
or professional gamblers, probably.
Or professional gamblers for that matter. But you've spent 14,000 hours helping people. And I imagine there are certain common denominators that all humans, regardless of what they're trying to go for in this lifetime, can benefit from. I'm just wondering, what are some of the basic principles of success, mastery, performance tweaks that kind of you've seen yield a big return on the investment of energy?
Well, the first thing is I believe that humans are humans. And what I'm looking at high performance here. So high performer in professional gambling, or a CEO of a company, or a Wall Street trader, or a UFC fighter, or Olympian, it's someone trying to perform at their peak under pressure. And the thing that typically stops someone doing that is self-sabotage, fear of failure, fear of success, self-worth issues. So we're not necessarily looking at how does someone technically play a poker hand, or what does somebody do in a certain situation in a UFC fight. What we're looking at is, where are you psychologically holding yourself back from being your best self in that moment, in that clutch moment where it really matters? Fortunately, the majority of these sessions go back to childhood and self-worth issues. Am I loved? Am I lovable? Am I good enough? And then that self-sabotage shows itself in different ways. And people seem to give themselves a certain level that they're comfortable with. And you can sort of see it as a wealth thermostat, but it's also a success thermostat. So
totally,
we see it in money, the person who can always get to 100,000, or they can always get to 1 million, or even 10 million. Doesn't matter, but they bring themselves back to that level because that's where they're comfortable. Oftentimes it's the same in performance. So they're comfortable being number 10 in the world, but the thought of being number 1 and what that brings is a struggle for them. That's very, very difficult. And the work that I do is trying to uncover why they feel they don't deserve that at a subconscious level, not a conscious level. So consciously, do you want to be number one in the world? Yes. Okay, well, we're seeing these self-sabotages here, and here in your profession. Clearly, there's something holding you back from truly wanting to be number one in the world. And then in these sessions, it often brings up that, as I say, the self-worth. Am I lovable? Am I good enough? Do I deserve this? What will it mean? What will people think of me if I do reach the top? Can I face the Twitter judgment of being number one in the world? Those sorts of things. And that really is, for all high performers, I see this trend. And then that's the work I do. So it's not dramatically different, whether it's a poker player or UFC fighter or businessman, running $1 billion company. It's the same thing over and over again.
There's something so terrifying about being good at something, because we tend to be, when we're good, we're more exposed. And when we're exposed, we're more likely to get those Twitter tomatoes in our faces. And one of the things that you said that was so fascinating about the common denominator of high performance is addressing the inner saboteur, the part of ourselves that keeps us from living our best lives and maybe keeps us safe, so to speak. Because quite frankly, it is actually dangerous when Gandalf knocks at your door and says, we're leaving the Shire. We are going to expose you to dragons and terrifying things out there. Or when Obi-Wan Kenobi says, let's get off Tatooine and really get you out there. This is terrifying. So I think that it's apropos of this hero's journey, that part of it is the knock at the door and the willingness to get out of our comfort, as you're describing. Is that consistent with your experiences?
Definitely consistent. And also, I think we have to remember it's the subconscious just doing its job. So your subconscious doesn't care if you're number one in the world. Your subconscious wants you to be safe. It wants you to be fed, have a roof over your head, and ideally be having sex. If you've got those things nailed down, it doesn't want to take on further risk, because it's like, hey, we're not going to die.
Totally.
We're getting our basic needs met. And then anytime we're pushing to reach the next level, there's this thread of change equals potential danger. And it puts up all of these defenses to try and stop you putting yourself in that danger, when it's saying, hey, we're doing our job, you're safe, just continue on the pathway. Even if, as I say, consciously we think that pathway is potentially negative for us, the subconscious is just like, hey, I'm doing a great job. We don't need change here. And number 5 in the world is wonderful. We don't want those tomatoes thrown.
Totally. So I love that phrase, change equals potential danger. And that is entirely true. And I think about the fact that anything courageous is predicated upon our willingness to be vulnerable. And we must be scared. If we're climbing Mount Everest and we're not afraid, it's not courageous. And for somebody else, just going on a local hike with a little bit of climb might be very courageous when they feel the fear and do it anyway. What are some thoughts that you have on that then?
It's having this idea of really everything that you want is beyond that line. And we're living in this world where you can, everyone who comes to me can quite comfortably stay exactly where they are.
Sure.
So, as we were talking a little bit before the show, I'm working with people at 95%, trying to reach 97, 98%, because the final few percentages are so valuable. So I'm having these conversations of, hey, you've reached out to me because you want to reach that highest level. You want to break through. You want that extra few percent. We need to be willing to make some changes to make that happen. And you must be willing to some extent, because you've gone through the discomfort of reaching out to a performance coach.
Sure.
Which is vulnerable in itself. The first step is, if someone's reaching out to me, there's a level of vulnerability that they've taken a step of facing their fears, even with the email or the phone call that they've made. Mine is more about looking at the past and the programs they've created, in the same way of my fear of flying program that was running, this program of the subconscious, and sort of negotiating with the subconscious through parts type therapy or through this sort of regression, changing the initial sensitizing event, so that the program then is running in a way that's optimal to be the best, rather than optimal in a way to keep you where you are and safe. So it's sort of a negotiation with the self through hypnosis. So, I can picture it in my mind because I've done 14,000 sessions. So I hope that makes sense to the listeners as well as to what I'm trying to describe there. But it's negotiating with the subconscious to change the program, rather than just saying, hey, we're going to override that with affirmation. Because although you can, in the short term, sometimes get through things with affirmations or suggestion hypnotherapy, which is like listening to a hypnosis audio you might find on YouTube and following to build your confidence, something along those lines. Typically, I find if you're not changing the root cause, you're not really adjusting the behavior long term. These are short-term band-aids rather than a behavioral change, which then makes things easy.
Such a great point. And addressing the root cause within the context of this internalized saboteur and looking at them, just as you said, as parts, kind of that internal family systems model, and amongst others in psychosynthesis, the idea of actually seeing that these are within us host of voices that can show up, and that we need to address the root cause and perhaps assuage the internalized saboteur who's trying so badly to keep us safe and to keep us away from change. I think of the polar opposite. I often reference that moment, that great moment in Good Will Hunting, where the Ben Affleck character says, "Get out of Southie. You need to go live your life and become a mathematician, and I never want to see you again." What a good friend. A lot of friends would say, "Don't leave Southie. We need you every Friday night, and don't live your best life." And essentially, that is kind of a metaphor or a personified version of what we're talking about. Somehow calming down that part of us that might hold us back, hold us in Southie, and say, release yourself.
And a really good analogy as well, Adam, because really the fear that so many of the clients I work with is that they will lose those types of relationships because they don't believe their friends and family will be supportive. When we do these sessions, we're digging into the subconscious. It's like, why are you holding yourself back? And I'm already much more successful than my brother. And if I reach that next level, I'm worried he won't treat me the same way. I don't want to make more money than my dad ever made is a really big one. That's come up a ton of times when they're stuck at this certain level. You know, what are you making? I'm making $1 million a year, $1 million. Okay, that's interesting. How much money did your dad make? Well, in his best year, he made $1 million. Okay.
Right. Don't eclipse the father.
Yeah, don't eclipse the father. That's a big thing for a lot of men, and they're not aware that they're doing it. But there's this, if I overtake my dad, what does that mean? Where am I in the family? If I'm now the person who's made the most money, what does that do to the family dynamic? What does my mum think if my dad's no longer the hero because him making $1 million was his hero's story and I've now beaten it? There's all these interesting things that come up in the sessions, which again, it's all just safety. It's all the subconscious doing its job. Hey, I'm trying to keep you safe. We don't want to risk dad not loving us as much.
Yeah.
Better keep it at 950.
And you know, one of my best educators in life has been cinema, and I think filmically. And there's this scene in Searching for Bobby Fischer where the boy knows he can beat his father in chess and he doesn't want to. And he needs the encouragement from his father to say, listen, knock me down. And it's just so hard. And I think about the archetypes. We've been talking a little bit about Star Wars, and Darth Vader, I believe, comes from a Jungian archetype, and that Darth Vader is to represent the dark father. And the dark father can be a tormentor or can be a mentor. But regardless, there is a survivor's guilt that can be incurred if, God forbid, we eclipse them. And I say God forbid because it's actually the opposite, quite frankly, because it's important that we live our best lives. And a good father would say to his son, honor me and live your best life, whatever that might be, whether you eclipse me or not. That's not how I see you. And one of the things I heard in one of your podcasts, and I think it bears repeating here, is your love of Carol Dweck's work out of Stanford, and I'm a fellow fan around mindset, around honoring the effort of what the child does, not the results. And I think that's a crucial piece. Can you address that?
Yeah. So, I mean, excellent book, Mindset. I recommend it to all of my clients. I must have sold so many books for her. Like, Carol, one day if you're listening, come on my show.
I've both of us, right? I mean, I've definitely sold a lot of her books too.
It's really good. So it's growth and fixed mindset. So fixed mindset, take an exam, you fail, you're there for a bad person. Growth mindset, you take an exam, you fail, it's great feedback because you've learned the things that you then need to improve on, and you've got feedback and you can continue this evolution of growth through your life. So that's sort of the theme of the book. But we look at that with our children in a number of ways. And one is we've got 8-year-old twins. We certainly push them in as far as we can in every way that only the effort matters. It is not really relevant how successful they've been, how they match up against their peers at school. The most important thing is that they're trying and that they understand that effort equals change and improvement. And that's the way you improve in life. A good example of it is one of my daughters was watching Barbie Mermaid the other day, and Barbie becomes a mermaid in it, and she could swim with her tail right away. And my daughter was like, this isn't realistic. She's only got the tail. She would need to practice first because you have to practice before you can be that good. And I'm like, yeah, this is sinking in. This is sinking in. If you're concerned about someone having an ability to use a mermaid's tail. But then we also try and utilize this with the way we show love to our children as well. And I actually got this Katie Wells. She has a podcast called Wellness Mama. She's a friend, and we've spoken a lot about how we raise our children. So I'm mentioning her because I stole this from her, and I just thought it was so wonderful. We use it with our kids. Is it doesn't matter how bad you are, we'll still love you. So if you're naughty, we'll love you, etc. But much more importantly, and the thing so many parents I feel miss is it doesn't matter how successful you are, we won't love you anymore. And I think that's so key to teach your children, is that there's not some balance of them getting a gold medal, them getting an A in a test means they have more love from you, because that can set them in a direction in life that's unhealthy for their happiness. So it's wonderful if you get first in the class, especially if it's just for your efforts, but we love you infinitely anyway. And that doesn't decrease if you're bad, and it doesn't increase as you're good. Our love for you is separate from those things. And we really have focused on that a lot. And as I say, that 8 so far seems to be good. I can give a true review in about 30 years' time, and I can, effective. But I think it's a powerful way of bringing up your children. I see a lot in my sessions. Obviously, a lot of it goes back to childhood, and most of it's our parents, and all of us are going to make mistakes. But because of that, I'm pretty aware with my children of the different things I've seen impact children negatively when I've seen the adults and have done sessions with them. And certainly the giving and withholding of love is one of the key factors, I think, when we look at these self-sabotage issues coming up in adulthood.
I love that. And it must have felt so gratifying and validating for you to hear your daughter on her own share with you that this was not realistic. That practice, really practicing.
Not that she magically got a fishtail. That part was acceptable.
Right. And I can go with that too, because let's face it, it's Barbie, or Disney or whatever it might be. But the idea that she has internalized the learning curve around sucking before succeeding.
Yeah.
And
she's too good at it.
Totally. And one of the things I would have my kids repeat on the way to school is that repetition is the mother of mastery. I would have them say that multiple times just so that they would kind of inculcate that in their minds and be willing to suck for a period of time. I think about the fact that I can speak Japanese because I was willing to suck for a long time. That's the only reason I speak it, is because I sucked for a long time, and I tolerated the suck as I was talking to myself. And I'm wondering, as we parent ourselves, engaging in self-talk to kind of correct for the inner critic's voices and perhaps viruses that entered our subconscious as we grew up, what are some ways that you can soften that inner critic's voice as you see it? Because I think that may be one of the biggest impediments between going from 95 to, say, 97 or 98% as we go there.
Yeah, I mean, self-talk will have the negative voice in our mind. It's just one of the parts. And again, it's just trying to keep you safe. The obvious one that everyone's heard is, would you speak to someone else that way? And generally, we would never say such awful things to other people. And one of the things we have an exercise we've had our clients do in the past is, imagine it was your mindset coach. So imagine it's Elliot. What would he say in this moment? So trying to turn it into a third party of someone who is going to give you positive affirmations, positive feedback. So it's like, what would the inner mindset coach say?
Mm-hmm.
And they're not going to say, you're a failure, you're not good enough, I hate you. They're going to say, again, it's going to be growth mindset stuff. It's going to be, you tried. What can we learn from this? How can we improve next time? Let's forgive ourselves and move forward and take the lessons. And nearly all of those moments. So the way that we approach to a woman we found attractive and we've embarrassed ourselves, or the business deal that went wrong, or the thing that was said in a meeting that cost us money. In all of those cases, it's usually oh my goodness, I failed, et cetera, et cetera. So it's always fixed mindset, going back to that book. And in all of those same cases, we can say, I've got some data I didn't have before. So this is just building a data bank in my mind where I can be more effective. I've got to be happy that I approached the woman and I made a terrible mistake and I got rejected, because that was actually getting rejected, and having that data is more valuable than never having made that approach in the first place.
And I love that. And one of the things we didn't actually actively address is the fixed mindset as a comparison to the growth mindset. And the fixed mindset in that scenario that you just described, where this guy is trying to be good at connecting with women, he might think of himself as, well, there are guys who got game and there are guys who don't got game, and I don't got game. And that's a profoundly deleterious mindset, because the growth mindset suggests that everyone can learn whatever skills we want to learn, even if we're not a natural.
Everything is a skill. I mean, you probably see this one come up a lot, Adam, as well. Public speaking.
All the time. All the time.
Yeah. I mean, the number of clients who come to me and they're like, I struggle with public speaking. Okay, how much public speaking do you? Oh, I dodge it always. I never practice. I'm like, okay, well, as a starting point, you're not supposed to be good at it right now.
Except the fact that you will suck for a little bit.
You will suck for a long time because you've actively not practiced this for the last 20 years because you haven't wanted to face it. And that means when you do start doing this, we reduce the anxiety and you can step on stage, you're going to need reps before you catch up with the people who've been doing it for 20 years.
For sure.
And I just always find that there are these certain things where people think they should have the natural talent. Abilities with the opposite sex, as I say, is one of them. Yeah, public speaking is one that comes up all of the time. I should be able to do this. It's like, well, you've never practiced. You shouldn't be able to do anything you've never practiced.
That's right. And the willingness to engage in the practicing and the willingness to begin that long journey with that first step and to continue through the wind, through the jeers and the tomatoes that come your way internally. And that idea that you brought in around self-compassion as being directly tied to one's ability. And one of the major tenets, according to Chris Germer, who has been one of the big clinical proponents of self-compassion, is that ability to talk to yourself the way you would talk to a friend, or to internalize a kind, compassionate, wise voice rather than the internal jeering voice. We talk to ourselves in a manner that we would never talk to anyone else. And if we did, that would be scorched earth and we would never be in touch with those people again. But if we're able to find a way to speak to ourselves kindly as we are sucking and move through the suck, and then to your point about the public speaking, Jerry Seinfeld had a joke that we would rather be the person in the casket rather than the person eulogizing, that we fear public speaking more than death. And that seems to be consistent. And that brings me to another point, and that is improving where we are already good. The research is fairly solid that we get a bigger return on investment for our efforts if we practice where we're already good, and yet getting from 95 to 97 or 98% is very, very difficult, as you know. Can you speak to that phenomenon of why it's difficult and how we can best address our best skills and getting them from that 95 to 97 or 98?
When you're at the 95%, you are in your comfort zone.
For sure.
You're already better than almost everyone that you meet in the area. And your ego is going to be tested when you try and reach the next level. So there's going to be a part of you that you think you're already great. And there's still a little bit to learn, but it's very subtle. And it's going to be an awful lot of work for those extra few percent. When we're very much a beginner in a sport, in an activity, you see these enormous gains from a relatively small amount of effort. When you're in the top percentile, it's an enormous amount of effort for seemingly minuscule gains. Sort of an acceptance and understanding, you're going to have to put in more effort. You're going to have to put your ego to the side in an activity where your ego is probably quite strong. One of the things that I've seen with high performers who've actually reached number one in the world, I've been fortunate. I've worked with a number of people who we've got them to literally, they've been number one in the world at whatever they do, was they have an attitude with their competitors that they want to know what the competitors are doing to learn from them, even though their competitors might not be as good as them or as they're reaching the top. So I'll hear them talking about their competitors and they'll be like, it's interesting because I see him doing X or I see him doing Y. I wonder why he's doing those things. With the people who are, let's say, the 90%, maybe not the 95, but this is all quite subjective. I see a criticism of their competitors. So the ego kicks in and it says, everyone else is terrible, I'm the best.
And they diss them.
And they diss them. And it's quite interesting seeing this theme between people who reach the very pinnacle being pretty kind to their competitors and saying, what can I learn? And people who get very close being very critical of their competitors. And I've seen that as a repeating pattern over a number of industries, and enough so that it's worth mentioning in this podcast that if you're saying everyone else is terrible and I'm the best, probably you're not the person who's the very best. You're probably close and you might have some arguments, but from what I've seen, the people who are the very best are actually very open-minded to say, where can I find the next edge? Where can I find the next edge?
I could not agree more. I professionally engage in this. I've done well north of 10,000 hours as a psychologist. And yet every week I meet with a senior consultant. I pay him to kind of comb through what might I tweak, what I might be missing. And I try to learn from people like you on my podcast. And I love the idea of being humble and open to listen and tweak little things and ask yourself, might this work for my formula, for my winning formula?
And again, the change is probably subtle.
Very.
But over a year, over 5 years, over 10 years, over 20 years of doing these things, that incremental change has dramatic impact in terms of where you can be at the end of that period of time.
Couldn't agree more. And I see it as the accumulation of something with the thinness of something like tissue paper, that each effort yields something very light, very thin. But over the course of those years, it becomes as thick as a phone book and would not have happened without that. And I just marvel at the idea that getting from, say, 45 to 95 is probably less effortful than getting from 95 to 97 or 98. And that's your zone where you help people the most. And quite frankly, I believe that's a part of what I do as well. And just witnessing the kind of acting as the midwife as people are becoming their best selves and humbling themselves to the point of saying, I will listen, I will learn, and having that growth mindset. It's just the most delightful thing to witness, people just shining. I imagine you've experienced that as well.
Yeah. It's so fun to watch. Yeah. When people ask me why I do it, it's great to be paid, but I would do this for free. If I win $100 million on the lottery or something, I'll still be doing my job for free because I love the stories. I get to have impact on people who can have impact on large numbers of people. So CEOs of companies, I've worked with people who run charities, those sorts of things. So seeing that you can watch someone change and grow as a person and grow professionally, and then watch the impact they can then have on the world, it's a wonderful spot to be in. And I definitely agree with you that that final few percent is just as much work, if not more work, as the 40 to 95. But then it also, the reward for those few extra percent is so dramatic. So the difference between being number 10 in the world in a sport and number 1 is probably 10x the financial return. A trader who is slightly better than their peers, the financial return is astronomical. I believe almost all of the rewards for anything are in the top tiny percentile. And then, the top 5% make money. And then most other people are struggling. And then this is where it's like, if you're nearly there, it really is worth trying to make sure you reach the very top, because that's where you'll get the majority of the reward.
I love what you're saying. And I was sitting with a true expert in his field who was listening to a novice as if he was learning from a master. And I asked afterwards, I thought I accurately inferred what was going on. And he said, absolutely. I want to have a beginner's mindset. And this is one of the ways I do it. I listen to people who are new and find out what they're experiencing. They may have insights that somebody has missed along the way. So everyone is a potential teacher. I see that you learn and improve your firmware each time you have a session. And that's kind of how I see it too. Like, I can't believe I get to sit with really cool people and improve my firmware every week. So that's how I want to rock this. That said, is there anything I should have asked but haven't yet asked?
I mean, I think there are some basic performance things that we should just always mention whenever we're talking about high performance. And there's some such low hanging fruit that the everyday person knows they should be doing, but they're not. So, I mean, we were discussing quality of sleep, unbelievably important for high performance. Exercise, meditation, diet. So I'll have people come to me and just say, I'm trying to get people from 95 to 97, but you want to do all of the other cleanup if you can before you're trying to get those small percentage improvements. So if you're getting less than 7 hours sleep a night, you should be looking into that. You should be working with a sleep coach. If you're not exercising at all, you are missing the easiest way of improving your life and your performance. If you're not meditating, start with 5 to 10 minutes a day. It will change the way you view reality. Life will be less stressful for you. And all of the hypnotherapy stuff, the digging into the subconscious, all of that is very interesting. But there is a huge amount of potential growth to happen from these things that you can do for free at home. So I would just make sure you've ticked those boxes first if you're out there and you're thinking, oh, this sounds good, because you can move a long way up, up the tree without having to even dig into the subconscious.
I love this so much, what you're saying, because we tend to lionize not sleeping and various sympathetic nervous system activities, the fight, flight, freeze. And we don't tend to recognize that the difference maker, probably the big difference maker, between the 95 and the 97, 98 is engaging the parasympathetic, the rest digest, the tend and befriend, the part of our nervous system, the autonomic nervous system that is addressed through these techniques like meditation, through sleep, through yoga, through various actions that will allow us to really tap into our wiser mind so that when stimuli comes down the pike and it may come at us very fast, it's almost like Neo in, here I go with a movie on Neo in the Matrix, where these bullets are coming at him really slowly and he's able to stop them midair. And obviously we can't do that with a bullet, but it's a great metaphor for how we might address a difficult, fast problem and slow our mind down so that we can access that 97, 98%, 99 even, as we are trying to address it well. I was taxed with that last week. I was in a situation, one of my sons had, and everything turned out fine, had an emergency. And as a father, I freaked out and I had to just kind of breathe a few times because the answer is often just right under our nose. And I was able to do something intelligent in the face of real adversity. And that was a good moment. And I'm so glad I was able to access a smarter voice in the face of something that could have made me incredibly stupid, because that's also happened. And of course, it's the post-game analysis after I act stupidly.
The growth mindset of learning for this time.
And then I find myself thinking, just before I go with my last question, of this great, great moment in a story that Michael Meade, probably one of the wisest human beings walking the planet today, former guest on the podcast, I have adored him for decades. He describes in this story called The Water of Life, these three brothers who are all trying to save their father's life. And they are all riding off on horses at different times. Each of them passes a dwarf the dwarf asks, "Where are you going?" And the first two brothers have hubris and they're not willing to get off their horses. They ride off a cliff. The third brother says, "I have absolutely no idea." And the dwarf says, "It's really good that you got off your horse because I know where the water of life is. And I also know that if you don't listen to me, you will ride off the horse, right off the cliff, just like your brothers did." So there is something about being able to address the little man, so to speak, inside of all of us, the little person inside of all of us, that wise little, don't let that almond-shaped amygdala override that higher cortex and hijack your thinking. So there's something so profound. And of course, the younger brother was the one who saved the day. It's called The Water of Life by Michael Meade. You can download it on Audible. It's something that I recommend frequently to my people. Every single person who has listened to it has come back describing it as pretty much a 10 out of 10. It is one of those stories. And I've even told it to my sons at a very young age. They know The Water of Life quite well. I just can't thank Michael Meade enough. But speaking of which, I can't thank you enough. You're crushing it. And we'll ask you my final miracle question, Elliot. And that is, if you had the magical powers to confer upon all humanity one insight or one skill that would vastly improve their lives, what would it be? And how do you imagine it would impact the individual as well as perhaps society at large, since we are all connected?
You are not your problems. I think if people could separate themselves from the way they label themselves, it would have an unbelievable impact on society. So many people will say, "I am anxious. I am angry. I am a frustrated person. I am a lazy person." And you're not your problems. They're just learned programs. And I think if people could understand how, with effort, they can be unlearned because it's not who you are. It's not intrinsic in yourself. I think that would impact society incredibly. And that's what I'm really trying to do with all of the work that I'm doing, is helping people unlearn things they've learned and remove this idea of it is them. So that would be the concept that I bring to the whole of humanity, is just, yeah, you might be angry today. That's fine. Let's unlearn it. It's not who you are. Just creating that little bit of space, this idea that, oh, perhaps I just learned this, rather than it. If you say you are that, you don't have any space to improve. But if you learned it, then you know you can learn something different.
What a beautiful idea. Rather than saying I'm depressed or I am anxious, saying I'm wrestling with this and I can learn to perhaps live with this better, or perhaps reduce this profoundly, but I am not my problems. And in so doing, you have basically come up with the formula for erasing shame, because shame is about who we are, not what we did or what we're dealing with. And as shame causes people to turtle, kind of go back into their shell and hide rather than address. So I love your wish. And dude, I just so enjoyed our time together today. I can't thank you enough, Elliot, for all you're doing and just for all you've shared just during this brief time we've shared together.
And thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Right on, man. This is Dr. Adam Dorsey thanking you for listening to Super Psyched. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you like the episode, please hit subscribe.